Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining myself and Elaine for today's session, Behaviour Strategies in the MFL Classroom. This is a joint collaborative webinar between myself here at Global School Alliance and Elaine at Languagenut. We'll get started. Just to introduce myself to people who perhaps don't know me, I'm Julie Sutcliffe. I now work at Global School Alliance after over 30 years in the classroom teaching languages. I've had roles as in leadership, working at trust level, GCSE examiner, and now I am education development lead with particular focus on MFL with the Global School Alliance. Elaine's here with me as well. She's just going to introduce herself.
Hello, everybody. Those of you that know me, I'm already 4 or 5 years in with Languagenut. Used to be a senior director for a very large trust across the north of England. As Julie, I've worked as head of department, done lots of other jobs. I was an AST, I've been an SLE, and I've worked with Ofsted and with the government really on quite a lot of resources over the past. So back to you, Julie.
Thanks, Elaine. So this afternoon, we're going to be looking at, as I said before, behaviour management in the MFL classroom. We're going to look, first of all, it's a double act. So I'm going to start off by looking really at the theory and the principles behind behaviour management in an MFL classroom in particular, and moving across then with Elaine, we're going to be looking at strategies to help you to create those calm, consistent, motivating MFL classrooms where every learner feels safe to take those risks, make mistakes, and ultimately succeed. Obviously, we have a lot of experience between us, so we're going to be drawing on these years of language teaching and also linking it quite closely to research and evidence. Just to let you know that we are obviously meeting some of the teacher standards here, and they are listed on the screen for you there. So they're the links to the teacher standards. And also we have on the next slide the links to the Scotland professional standards as well. So I'm just going to start, as I say, with we're going to look at 12, if you like, principles in no particular order that I think underpin classroom management, classroom behaviour management across subjects, but I will be referencing MFL in particular. And we're going to start off with this one, which talks about establishing the psychological safety of those students in our classroom before we really tackle any linguistic challenge. If we put ourselves in the shoes of the students, language learning is quite exposing. They have to speak aloud, they risk making mistakes in front of their peers, they can be heard quite openly making those mistakes. And so students in the languages classroom often feel quite vulnerable and quite anxious because of these factors. And there are studies that show that foreign language anxiety can severely limit output. So what we try to create, obviously, are those safe and structured classrooms that will then lower that anxiety so students can participate confidently. So before we challenge them, we must build trust. And obviously, if a child feels exposed, if a child feels at risk, then their behaviour might demonstrate that, or it might be exposed, it might manifest itself in the behaviour that they exhibit. So really we need to build trust, we need to build a relationship with those students. Psychological safety for them, in their eyes, means that they feel secure enough to take risks without fear of embarrassment. And so what that means is that we want to create a classroom where we've got warmth, tone is supportive, and everything is quite predictable. We need to start our lessons with calm, confident, with a presence. We need to model the behaviour that we want our students to exhibit as well, and really celebrate the little small wins. Because when students know that you're going to be patient with them, when you're going to support them and really bring them on and support them with their efforts rather than ridicule them, then they're far more likely to try. And that will mean that they're more motivated, and that in itself will promote engagement and positive behaviour. And there's just a little quote there from Amy Edmondson's research, and she shows that motivation doesn't actually stick in unsafe environments. So it's really important that we think, what fundamentally do our students feel safe in our classrooms? Then I'm going to move on to kind of thought about that and pointed towards that in what I said before. We really need to think about the structure of our lesson and those clear routines, because routines, if a child turns up to our lessons and they know exactly what to expect, they know that they're going to have to line up outside, they know where they sit, they know that what is projected onto the board, if it's a whiteboard, is going to be the same every time. Those routines will help to lower the anxiety and lower that behavioural friction. And particularly in MFL, routines might mean a consistent start, that greeting that's always in the target language. They might need to answer the register by using the same phrase every time, a short retrieval quiz. You might use hand signals, gestures for transitions between activities. And this predictability helps students feel in control. So they're not going to necessarily exhibit that behavior, that distraction, that can't do it, because they know what's coming. It's not unusual to them. It's all predictable. And that will also free up their working memory to actually help them and support their learning. So routines are not just about being really, really rigid and things to stick to and to be like a straitjacket, but they are the scaffolding to allow the students to feel comfortable in your classroom so that you can go on later for that creativity and that success that will follow. Next, we're going to look at, again, it builds on consistency. So as a teacher, we have our routines. We have that predictability in our classroom only because we are relentless in the consistency. And this consistency builds trust, because pupils will watch how we respond more than what we say. So if we're calm, if we're predictable, if we have the routines and the rules that show that expectations are fair and stable and what we say will happen and we will follow through, then all of those things are going to really feed into that positive behaviour. And behaviour expert Tom Bennett reminds us exactly that inconsistency, if we look at the negative, inconsistency breeds that insecurity. And when the students don't know what to expect or they're not sure what's coming next, then that's where we see the negative behaviour for learning popping in. So really it's about that steady tone, that reliable structure to make our classrooms safer for everyone. In MFL, again, it's about reducing that anxiety. Therefore, we are then going to really focus on that positive behaviour. So next, say these aren't in any particular order, but I think it's really, really important to guarantee that early achievable success, because nothing will motivate a child or a student, a pupil in our lessons more than feeling successful, feeling that they can do it. Inherently, MFL, they see as perhaps more challenging. Some students won't have necessarily studied that particular language or any language to a great degree at primary school, depends on their experience. They might be coming to us and starting a new language at secondary. So really, we need to give them that sense of achievement straight on. So it's really important to build in those quick wins into your lesson, with short recall tasks, quite simple matching activities, simple speaking exchanges that all pupils can do really, really well. Those early successes will boost their confidence, release that dopamine hit, and kickstart that motivation. And that was supported in a study on self-efficacy, listed there for you in 1997 by Bandura. And visible success tells learners, I can do this. And if they feel they can do it, then they're much more willing to attempt more and to try some harder tasks. What we also need to do is plan for success, because planning in advance will also help us to help the students. So carefully design input and tasks so that they're matched to the level of attainment and the needs of your students. Highly comprehensible language gives them that I can attitude. They can do it. They can see it, using cognates as well. So when we're facing our students with a task, prepare them appropriately. Do some pre-activities, some prep activities, some quick and easy little games, some vocabulary recall to help them carry out the task that you want them to do more successfully. If we look at the self-determination theory as well, this also backs up what I was saying there about that autonomy and that engagement and that motivation. A classroom environment where students feel safe, feel that they can do it, feel competent, fosters intrinsic motivation and this higher quality of learning. And for teachers, the main implication here is really to actively support and nurture the students. And yes, we will eventually lead to some autonomy once they have that kind of structure in place. We can then afford them that choice of learning. We can then allow them those student-led goals. We can make sure that they have the appropriate level of challenge, not too difficult, but just taking them outside of their comfort zone, and then obviously giving them feedback as well. And this scaffolding is really, really important to feed into that success. And for me, one of the most important things when we're thinking about behaviour is the teacher-student relationship. And this kind of runs through everything that we're going to talk about this afternoon. And I think those teachers that really demonstrate care and respect for these students as individuals really can, again, boost that positive behaviour for learning in their classroom. So simple greeting them at the door, checking in with them individually, the praise, the feedback, and obviously planning tasks that lead to success for them, so that they have then that intrinsic motivation. So following on from that, this is something that we mentioned. Those high control tasks are really crucial right at the very beginning, before we move on to freer activities with freer choice or open-ended. Because students build stamina gradually. We need to keep that level of success feeds into motivation, that loop, we need to keep that going. And if we go straight from teacher input to open-ended production, it'll turn off our weaker learners, they'll disengage, or they'll start messing around because they feel they can't do it. And they want to distract from that. They want to distract from that feeling of, I don't know what I'm doing, can't do it, I'm not good enough. And so they'll act up. So structure lessons, making sure that the structure is really quite sound with chunks, with short tasks in the first instance, quick drills, guided, scaffolded pair work, for example, and then finally moving up to releasing that control into more student-led autonomous activities. For example, it's a bit like warm-up before a game. Small steps, structured, that prepare your class for that independence whilst not losing that sense of motivation and reward. So the next one is from Doug Lamov himself, really. It's about teaching learning behaviours explicitly. And I think this is really, really crucial for language teachers. I don't think we should ever assume that students know how to listen actively, how to conduct pair work. I think we need to train them. And this is very, very important. It might be when they arrive for the very first time in your class in September, or it might be that, you know, every time you do that particular kind of task, you might need to remind them of how to behave. I'm thinking in my head about using mini whiteboards, and it's a real importance there to train the students how you want them to behave with the mini whiteboards, because otherwise you'll end up with them doodling, showing each other, copying, and all of those things. So I think it's really important that we train the students, that we model behavior. So show them what a good partner talk sounds like. Show them, demonstrate, model target language that you want them to use, and really continue to narrate and uphold those expectations until those habits are actually formed. Doug Lemov puts it like this: what you permit, you promote. So really make your expectations visible. Again, it goes back to that relationship between classroom behavior and cognitive load. Poor behavior in the classroom creates distractions and negative emotional states. And conversely, if we make things too difficult for them, that often manifests itself as disengagement. So again, it's a cycle. So we want to really, really make sure that they understand how to behave so that they can behave. And that will create an orderly classroom for us, which reinforces that positive behavior and helps to reduce their cognitive load. And I'll talk a little bit more about cognitive load a little bit later. Maximizing retrieval, praise, and visible progress. As you can see, I've split these up into separate principles, but really they intertwine and they overlap. I think frequent low-stakes retrieval is a behavior strategy as much as a memory one, because it feeds into that level of self-efficacy of the students. It allows them to remember, it supports their memory, it supports their ability to complete a task, and that in itself will support their behavior, because when pupils can see their progress, their behavior improves and their effort that they're putting in feels worthwhile. If they're putting in lots and lots of effort and getting nothing out, that's going to demotivate, and that'll end up as being off-task behavior. So I think it's really important. Whiteboards are fantastic for this, building in now that regular show me what you know moments, that regular retrieval, that regular visibility of show me, tell me, what have you learned so far. Whiteboards, vocabulary grids, 30-second challenges, 10-second challenges, brain dumps, all of those things where the student can feel that sense of pride. And then follow with specific praise. Obviously not just well done, that's great as well, but follow it up with something specific, like, oh, fantastic, you remember the adjective ending when it's feminine. Oh, well done, you've remembered to change it, or you've remembered to add an S because it's plural. So all of these things lead into that positive behavior. It boosts that self-efficacy, and ultimately it boosts morale and boosts behavior. Okay, our next principle, what about here? Oh yes, it's that controlled autonomy, not unstructured choice. And that's really important. It feeds back into what we were saying before about having that structure and that routine, and really not letting it get too free too soon. Students need autonomy. Students need, if we think about the self-determination theory, one of the strands was this autonomy and this agency. But giving them too much choice too soon can be overwhelming. And again, that leads to that demotivation, or I don't know what I'm doing, I don't know what to do. If I had a pound for every time somebody would say to me, but Miss, I just don't know how to start. Can you help me? Can you tell me how to start? Because when we leave it too open-ended, it really is too overwhelming for them. So providing structured options, so maybe sentence builders, sentence starters, pick from this box, use this or that, And it gives them that ownership, but without it being too chaotic, without it being too overwhelming. And in behavioural terms, this is autonomy supported structure. It preserves that engagement, but also maintains control. And then it's quite easy as well for you as the teacher to sort of keep the pace moving. So it's either that choice or that choice. Come on, which one's it going to be? So again, it helps you as the teacher to keep that structure and keep that routine and keep that consistency. Right, the next one, again, it's about how we then deal with errors and setbacks. All of this is said before that for me, the fundamental, most important thing is the relationship that you have with that student. Right back at the beginning, it's about them feeling safe. It's about them feeling comfortable and not threatened. They're not in a they're in a non-threatening classroom where it doesn't matter if they make a mistake. In fact, mistakes are actually welcomed because they're treated really positively by the teacher. Nobody's going to laugh. They're not frightened of getting things wrong. And actually, if you think about it, MFL, mistakes are the curriculum. We want them to make mistakes because we love being able to take that, address that misconception and really push their learning forward. Language learning is intrinsic in that it involves trial and error, but it also involves that fear of getting things wrong. And as I say, if students make a mistake, it's really, really important that we feed back to them positively. Oh, that's fantastic. Well done for trying. But now we know that one's not quite right. We know what to fix. Let's refine it. Let's add it. Let's think about that. And this breaks the failure avoidance cycle. It actually fosters that resilience, and it signals to the students that learning is a process, and it's about making progress, not perfection. And I used to tell my students that, you know, I still make mistakes, and that's fine because nobody is going to laugh at you. It's all about making sure that, I understand what my mistake was so that maybe we don't make it again next time. So again, it's about that positivity and that positive relationship that you're building with your students. Number 10, comes back to you then. You're the stable adult in the room. Your demeanor sets the tone. And you know, as I say, after 30 years in the classroom, I know there were times when I probably did lose it a little bit, you know, got a little bit emotional in that classroom. But really, it's about us trying our very, very hardest to stay calm, stay steady. The students rely on our calmness to feel secure. They rely on us for emotional steadiness. Even when things go wrong, they'll look at us. Oh no, you're the one that communicates that authority and that care. And I think that's really important in MFL because that performance anxiety can spike very, very quickly. They get embarrassed really, really quickly if they make a mistake. And so when we stay grounded, then the students do too. And it's about us being able to cope. Just linking back to what we said before about planning. And if we can plan our tasks and we know what we're planning and we're providing that stability for the students, when things do jump up that are unexpected, then we can also remain calm and deal with them in a calm way. Number 11, keep a tight, purposeful pace. As I say, these seem a little bit out of sync. They're in no particular order, but I think momentum also prevents that distraction. Momentum is a behaviour strategy because idle time invites distraction. If there's too much of a pause between activities, that can be a time for chat, off-task behaviour, messing around. So wherever possible, keep transitions sharp. Keep your tasks brief, not fast. You want to give the students enough time to actually complete the task, but not too much time that they sort of dwindle and lose time or lose focus towards the end. Keep the energy high if you can. Chunking your lessons is a real key to this. If needs be, use signals like countdowns, like timers, like 3, 2, 1, pens down. You may have a whole school strategy. for gaining student attention. That can be really useful in sort of keeping that, right, we've only got 1 minute, no longer, really keeping the pace and the focus. Purposeful pace prevents that behavioural drift, and it really keeps the engagement high. And finally, from me, don't let reading and writing dominate too early. And I think this is perhaps something that is counterintuitive sometimes, because I'll hold my hands up and probably say I've done it in the past, where you feel that, you know, if the class is getting too noisy or too raucous, it's like, right, okay, let's have a nice calm reading or a nice calm writing activity to sort of bring them down. Nothing wrong with that in and you know, if it's a one-off situation, or it really does need that calming. But as a plan, as a general rule of thumb, in the early stages of language learning, the oral and the speaking and the listening should really come first. Starting with too much reading or writing actually increases that cognitive load and can increase frustration. So if we build that fluency through spoken exchanges, through listening, through choral repetition, and introduce and keep the writing for later, for more consolidation, it helps us to keep our pace high, reduces the stress, improves the pupils' confidence, particularly with the speaking and listening, which perhaps they do find a little bit more tricky. But it ensures that students experience language as communication. And that's the real driver, isn't it? That language is communication, and it's not just transcription or writing or reading, that actually we're using the language for communication purposes. Yes, that will need training, as I've said before, training them, keeping your expectations really, really high in terms of what you expect in the classroom. But yeah, I think that's one principle that I would stick to. So I've come to the end of my sort of theory-based side of things, and I just wanted to leave you with this bit, just a little bit of a summary of what we've covered, that really we need to move from safety to structure and then to success. And that also underpins motivation and confidence. Think about those calm routines, that visible progress, building trust, and that trust will, as a result, build the engagement, and the engagement will then build learning. Keeping the pace high will also diminish the opportunity for that off-task behaviour. Because when behaviour, if we get that right, then everything else should fall into place. Pronunciation, engagement, motivation, and obviously progress. And I'm going to pass over to Elaine now, who's going to run through some real practical strategies now that you can employ in your classroom from tomorrow that underpin the principles that I've just run through with you.
Thanks, Julie, for giving us a lot of the kind of practical ideas linked to the research, which you could use in lots of subjects, not just languages. But we were talking just before the session tonight, saying that, you know, in languages, it's always about getting on with people. If you get on with your class and your children in your class, or as many of them as possible, get on with you and almost like you really, then you're not going to have any trouble with behaviour. It's so difficult as a linguist, because you're juggling 4 different tasks, 4 different skills. You might not be having your own classroom. You might have to lug textbooks around or resources or whatever you've got if you use certain things in the classroom. So kind of at a real sort of disadvantage really in many respects with languages. So building that behaviour trust at the beginning is so important. Now, in terms of Languagenut on our platform, I've listed all the things that Julie talked about in her session, and every single one of them, if you are a Languagenut subscriber, you probably know some of these and know what I mean. And if you're not, then I would urge you to get a demo, because that's how we started. That's how I started in 2018. I just got a demo and gave it a go and found it worked. If it works for you, then it's great. But at least have a go at trying it. And this week, in fact today, we started our competition. So If you're interested in setting your students up, even if you're not a Languagenut subscriber, you can contact me and we can put you in touch with the team. I've put my email on the last slide and you'll be able to set your classes up for the competition that started today. So what Julie talked about building trust, having that consistent structure, having those initial conversations with your students as they walk in, and also having a kind of like a good starter on the class that the children are happy to engage with fairly straightforwardly. On our platform, everything is consistent, so they know what they're going to get once they start on an activity. That activity runs through, and it runs through all the different vocabulary in the core, so they know what to expect. They can feel secure about taking the risks. They can practice independently with their self-marking activities, and they can make any mistakes with their speaking and their writing privately. They can do that in the comfort of their own home. We also have, as I've just mentioned about the competition, we've got lots of points that the students can get. And they can actually engage on the leaderboard. They can see how well they're doing, and you can actually showcase that around school. When I was working in last schools, I used to have the leaderboard displayed around the school if you've got screens in your school, and it's great for the students to see how well they're doing. In terms of who's the top in year 7, or who's number 7 or number 9 in year 10 or whatever. So it allows you then to link your praise with the way in which your students are engaging with the platform, whether you're taking them into an IT suite every week or you're just using it for homework. That's one of the things that I always found worked really well with our students. Modeling the mistakes is really good, so you can show tasks mistakes on a task. You might want to drop in your own vocabulary, custom content, and you can use that in class to show the students that can they spot the mistakes? Well, there might be a mistake with a gender, there might be a mistake with a tense if you're doing the sentence builders. So that again is another way for students to have mistakes modeled to them, and they can see that you have actually put a mistake in there, and you're quite happy to share that with them, that you've put a mistake into Languagenut platform. Obviously you can get rid of that then, and you don't necessarily have to keep that. You can remove it from the system. Our system also provides with your vocab training. You've got your word level, then you move to your sentence level, which is what you do on sentence builders, and then you move to paragraph level, which is what you do with the exam series. So you can see the build up and the progression that your students are making. We used to always set it for homework, and we used to set homework, I used to call it my Languagenut Monday, so 10 words, and I would use it the next day, and I'd put it on the screen as the practice quiz, and maybe remove the target language, or I'd remove the English, and get the students to try and remember it that way, and we do different activities around it. So again, it's all helping with that consistency and that routinization of what they're going to see, and it's something that's consistent with them. The short snappy recall that Julie mentioned, you can have your timed recall task. All of our tasks have got a timer set against them. So again, something that I've done a lot is I've said to them, right, we're going to look at this activity. How long is it going to take you to do this activity? And I was talking in Glasgow on Saturday to a lot of teachers up there in the SALT conference, and I told them that one of the things I used to do as head of department was I invested in a set of mirrors and a set of timers, because it's difficult if you're not allowed phones in your school, because all phones have a timer on them, right? But if your school doesn't allow that, then it's difficult to get them to get that out, because they're not allowed a phone, or it's not allowed to be visible. So give them a timer and say, right, how long is it going to take you to do this activity? And they would log the time in the margin with the date and maybe a title of the activity, and then maybe the next half term I would do the same activity with them involving the same vocabulary or the same exam skills text, and I'd say to them, right, we did this in week on such and such a date, 30th of September, we're going to do it again, but I want you to see if you can do it quicker. So you give them the times out, they go back to that time and they press the timer and they see if they can do it any quicker. And we also have lots of low stakes quizzes there. Students really like to have quizzes, but do them, with no sort of pressure on them. So all the low stakes stuff is all the quiz. They can practice before they take the quiz. And if they make a mess of the quiz, that's okay. They can still have another go. And all of our tasks have got 3 levels of difficulty on the platform. And as Julie mentioned, talking about that autonomy, working at their own pace, supported that, and they can take the quiz when ready. So that's how Languagenut fits into the the programme for a lot of the behaviour strategies that you might want to use. So building trust. So I think these are a couple of slide shots that I've taken from things that we've created in the past. So having your clear expectations on the board. Some schools expect you to write down your lesson objectives or lesson outcomes, whatever your school calls them, or maybe it might be a question or something, learning question, in your books. If that's what you have to do, you obviously have to adhere to your own policies in your own school. But actually getting that expectation at the beginning, whatever that expectation is, whether it's going to be having a mini whiteboard, splitting it into 4 and giving them 4 questions on the board, starting off with what's the word for lamp in French or Spanish, whatever language you're doing, and then second question, write the word for lamp with an adjective, so a bright lamp or a green lamp, and then put it into a sentence with an opinion as your 4th one. Anything like that, just to get them into that habit, and that just shows them then each year, each lesson going forward, that's the kind of routine that you are expecting, and you will find that that will settle your children when they come in. And it also means that any latecomers know straight away what's going on. They come in, they divide the board into 4, and they do their 4 examples, their 4 questions, or maybe it's writing the date, doing the register in the target language, whatever it is. Just keep it consistent, because it settles them down. And helps them to kind of get involved in the lesson. Knowing the names of your students is always something that we aspire to do, and it sometimes takes us a long time to do that, particularly when we've got so many students that we teach. You might only see that class once a week if you're a primary teacher. If you are teaching in a primary setting, you might only teach them once a week if you're going in there to just teach the languages. So it's really difficult to try and learn names. So trying to come up with some ideas of getting those names into your head can sometimes be a trial in itself. But knowing a child's name does help with behaviour. And if a child knows where the learning fits in, then it makes it more purposeful. So I always try and say to them what we're doing, why we're doing it, and how we're doing it. And the why is necessary here where you fit it in. So the one on the right side shows you where it fits into a half a term, and maybe the one on the left side shows you how it fits into the whole pattern of the entire sort of year 7 to 11. And then we will look at how, as Julie mentioned earlier, modelling how you're going to learn this. So if I expect them to use a particular resource, or I've got some vocabulary that I want them to learn, I will model it with them as to how they can help themselves to learn it at home. And I'll stop the lesson, even if I have to spend 15-20 minutes on saying this is how you can do it, or I'll have a resource and I'll give them maybe 3 or 4 different ways in which that resource can be used, so that when they do go home and they are trying to learn it, they're not just sitting there in their bedroom or the study or wherever it is they sit to learn and do their homework and know what on earth am I going to do with this, because a lot of children need support with learning how to learn. And also keeping those targets that you expect for them to do each lesson clear and precise. So any children that you know who are a bit more taxing when it comes to behaviour and are going to test you, you need to make sure that they're absolutely crystal clear with what the expectations are for that particular lesson. Some students even need to be told, open your books, write this down. It's great. Those of us that use acronyms a lot, I'm not fond of them, but WAGGLE is something I've used and has been used in schools I've worked on, meaning what a good one looks like. So to show them what are they aiming for, even if it means showing them a small paragraph or maybe 2 or 3 sentences, or giving them some clear examples and they just need to change bits of sentences and bits of paragraphs. Giving them something to aspire to is really good for behaviour, because it shows, well, if I can achieve that, then I know I can get to this particular level. Even showing them what a bad one looks like, a wobble. And that way you can say, right, what can we do to improve this? And year on year, when exams have happened, I've looked at my exam results and I've thought, right, I'm going to request some papers back here to get some examples of some live scripts that students have actually done. And I've brought those back into the classroom. And then during the year with year 10 and 11, and I've even done it lower down school, I've showed them an example of a live script. Obviously with the name, there's no name on that script, but you can say, this is the question and this is the answer that student gave in the actual exam. What marks do we think we would give this? And how do we know that? And actually using that as a clear example of what a good one looks like, or maybe what a student has bombed in. They might have done a writing exercise and they've really messed it up. What is it that has caused that issue? And going back, if you're using the exam criteria to look at something of that sort of nature, then you really need to show them what the criteria is. How are they going to be assessed? There's lots of different things you can do with that, lots of different areas of ideas and things that we can share with you. And I think one of our previous webinars, which we did maybe a couple of years ago now on AFL, if you go onto our platform, you'll see all our webinars there, and you can see one on assessment for learning and one on language lesson objectives, and those two will unpack with you some ideas to do that bullet point. Obviously sharing the I do, we do, you do. I know some schools that use that now as their kind of like explanation, that the teacher does it, they're the I, the pupils do it, they're the we, and then so all together, and then you do it on your own. There's different sort of levels of that. So you could I do it. You could bring out some of your troublemakers to the front and get them to be the I's with you. So if you've got 3 or 4 troublemakers, bring them out to the front and have them doing it with you. And that way you can keep an eye on behaviour. And that works. You know your classes and you know whether you can do that. But I certainly have had some amazing success in lessons to bring out troublemakers to the front, and it gets the behaviour sorted. And if they don't behave, then the people who are on their rows won't get any points or house points. And I make them responsible and explain that to them, that if you're coming out to the front, I'm asking you to be here. You are part of that team. And if you mess up here or you mess around, you're going to cost the rest of your row points or house points or whatever it is you give your students. Pause points to model an activity. As we said earlier, and Julie mentioned it as well, model the ideas that you're trying to get the students to do, or model the activities, or model the homework things that you're trying to get your students to use to learn things. And having time indicators on the board works really well for behaviour as well, to show the students know that this activity is going to be 5 minutes. You're not going to stick rigidly to 5 minutes, but they might say, oh, well, we've done that, so we know 5 minutes of that's gone. This activity we're probably going to have 10 minutes on. And it just helps psychologically in their minds to tick through the lesson without constantly going, miss, what time is it? Or being to kick off, well, actually, we've only got another 20 minutes left. So let's see if we can focus on that. And let's see who's going to get more points at the end of the lesson. Yeah, so this is an example that we used last year in one of our webinars where we did a top 10 tips for writing exam. And you can see here on the left, you've got a very structured sentence builder, substitution table, whatever you want to call it, for some students in your class. And then to the right hand side of that, you've got a much less structured one, just giving them headlines for different sort of infinitives and adjectives. Okay, simple way of keeping behaviour in order. And then this is my, as Julie mentioned earlier about some things you can do about just giving them praise. This is my kind of like what's in it for me stepped rewards pyramid, which, so it doesn't mean that you run out of ideas before too quickly. And one of the things that I'm really keen to sort of give you some a heads up on my experiences of 30. I mean, I started teaching in 87. And when I send out any letters home or texts or give any certificates or anything that is going to go home or that is going to be something that I think is going to benefit the students for behaviour, I always send it out in the first week after every half term or every term. Because in my experience, you've worked your socks off with a class and maybe a certain cohort of children or a few kids, and you're giving them the certificates and everything at the end of term or the end of half term, and they're going to go home, have a week off or 2 weeks off, and they're going to come back and they'll have forgotten all about it. So all that hard work you've done with your kids to get behaviour good, and you sent some praise home in whatever form you're doing it, it's going to be lost because they're just going to forget, and they're going to come back the first Monday after half term and they're just going to kick off again. Some of them will kick off all the time. So what I do is I send it in the first week, as I said, because they're coming in then to learning your lesson. They're starting on a positive note because you've given them, sent something home, or you've given them something positive, and they kind of like that kind of builds because they're not having any time then where they're not coming into school for 5 days, 2 days off, 5 days. And so it's fresh in their minds. And you then are going to benefit from all that hard work. It's just something to bear in mind, because in my experience, that works really, really well. This is what I've used for quite a long time. And we have copies of this on our platform, actually, the Vocab Crunch. These are from the legacy vocab, but we do have them for the new GCSE. And the Welsh board vocabulary is just about to be launched if you're in Wales. And I'm sure that we'll be making these for the Welsh board as well in all 3 languages. And the way it works is, we were talking earlier about modelling how to learn. You basically, in the first one, you've got French, English, and the second one you half it. The third one you half it again. So if a child goes home, has someone at home that can help them to learn, they can just show them the French or the English or the target language, whatever, and the person can test them. And they can do that in class as well, as a starter activity or a plenary or something in the middle if they've got some, somebody finishes early, so that your transition is not wasted and they're not sitting there doing nothing. But again, you need to get them into good habits for that. And I've also seen students who've cut this up. And again, you need to model that with them. You need to say, right, this is how we use it. Let's have an example of some cut up already, and just distribute them around the class, and this is how you do, and play pairs. And there's all sorts of different ways you can use matching up cards, not just by turning them over, but lots of different ways. And this is something that I've used quite a lot in terms of, I think I've updated this one for the new spec, yeah. So basically, this works almost like a sentence builder. You take a colour, a month, a sport, an issue at school, and make a sentence. That's in English, right? You could do it in target language. But one of the things that I've used it for often is, I'll say to them, right, as a starter activity, I want you to choose either, can you give me 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of each? And I'll say, I want you to give me buildings today. I want you to give me numbers. And then I might say to them, I want you to put that into a sentence. So you could use it anywhere you wanted. And then you might have a student who can only do 1 or 2, or somebody who can do only 1, or you might have a student who can do 5, some can do more. It's also really good for if you have a member of staff off, because you can take this in, you can give it to a non-specialist, and you can ask them to work on one of the columns and ask the students to do whatever. You can use it in whatever way you want, but it covers a lot of the different topics that are in the new specification. And there's lots of different ways in which you can use this. So my habits of starting this is, we all know how busy we are, and we all know we don't have much time, if we have any time. So I'll try and think of ways in which the students can work for me. So at the end, I'll get them to make a bingo card, maybe using vocab and phrases either in target language or the language, and or the foreign language. I'll bring those in at the end of the lesson with no names on, and then I'll use them either in the next lesson or in a lesson going forward as a starter, and I'll just hand those out, and we will basically do the bingo game. I'll do the same with noughts and crosses. And again, or tic-tac-toe, if that's how you know it. You can do it in different ones. You can even add pictures to that. You could add pictures to the bingo card. Oops, Julie, we've kind of done one there. Thank you. Also, I might ask them to draw what they've covered in the lesson today, and then in a future lesson, we'll swap that around and ask the pupils to describe that picture. And again, it's just my way of thinking of recall, but also it's giving me a bit of a break as well. You, as a teacher, need that time when you can just hand these things out and you think, the students will get on with this for 5 minutes, just giving me that chance to go around and monitor behaviour, or go around and give out house points or whatever it is you do. In terms of rewards in your school. Obviously, every school's different. Every school has its own unique way of rewarding students. And also preparing a mind map to show what they've learned. And again, you can revisit that at the start of the next lesson, whether revisit in pairs, or you can think, right, we've done it in week 4, we're going to do it in week 4 of next term. And just put it in a plastic folder and label it up and keep it somewhere handy. Yes, you have to be super organised to do something like that. I would imagine you're probably thinking, and you do. But if you get into those organisational habits yourself, you'll find it does pay off, because it's just buying you a little bit of extra time for something that the students have done for you. Okay, Julie, I think I'm handing back to you now with that last slide. Just let me just try it. Yep, there you go. I'm back to Julie now for this one. It's all right.
I think it's what was really fantastic there was that what we kind of complemented each other perfectly. So we talked about the theory behind it, and then Elaine had the real practical application of that in the classroom. And I think what you said about every school has its own behaviour policy, so we have to kind of remember that as well, that there will be some things that are sort of dictated to you on how you have to manage behaviour, manage rewards, but ultimately it goes back to what we both said this afternoon, which was about the relationships that you have with those students and building that level of trust so that they trust you, and then you can trust them and have that positive behaviour for learning. So we've come to the end of our webinar this evening. It'd be really good for you to have a little bit of reflection and think about what your takeaway is. I'm hoping that you've all benefited from at least one little idea that you could take away and use in your classrooms from tomorrow. If there's anything that you'd like to find out more about, you can contact both of us. I've got another slide in a second and we'll put both of our contact details up so you can get in touch with us, whether it's something to do with the research, the evidence, or if it's something to do with Languagenut and you want to ask Elaine a question around how Languagenut can support you in the classroom as well. I hope it's made you think a little bit more about perhaps you're already doing the right things, because sometimes it takes time to build up those relationships and to build up that trust, but it is that consistency and that routine and that sort of, keep going, because it will reap benefits in the end. I have our contact details there for you, so you can contact me here at Global School Alliance, and there's Elaine's email address as well, and we're also on the socials, and have a look at Languagenut and how that can support you, and please also have a look at how the Global School Alliance can support you in your classroom as well.
But yeah, anything that you want, or if there's any webinars or any content that you feel you could benefit from having, some kind of like, Julie and I are not experts, we learn every day. But what we do is we have a lot of experience between us. We've got over 70 years of experience in the classroom, and we've gone through many different specifications, haven't we, Julie?
Oh, yes.
And we've both been examiners and still are examiners, so we have a lot of experience that we're happy to share, and we're more than happy to share what we've done with you. So please don't think it's any question silly, because it's not. And those of you that are working in schools where you have trainee teachers, Languagenut has a free access for any trainee teacher for their trainee year, and also for 30 days when they've finished their trainee year. They can just go onto our platform, onto the landing page, and they can find it there. And they can sign in, they can get a password, use Languagenut in their schools where they're working, primary and secondary, whether you're in Scotland, whether you're in England, Wales, and you can get an accredited certificate, which is linked to every single teacher standard, just like we've linked tonight's session, and you can, it will tell you there the 5 videos that you work through to be able to get to the accreditation program, and that's worth doing, because it's a great platform for you to get used to using Languagenut. And obviously with Julie does a lot of trips, don't you, with your schools and so on?
Yeah, just very briefly, we organise partnerships. We have platform. If you join our platform, we can put you in touch with schools who are interested in forming partnerships, whether that's digitally for pen pals or for more collaborative long-term projects. And we also organise visits as well, so plenty of ways in which we can both support you. Yeah, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, so before we say goodbye, thank you so much for attending tonight and giving up time to listen to us on this webinar. And if you could give ourselves and Global School Alliance a shout out on social media if you've enjoyed tonight's session and you feel that you've got something from it, then that would be great.
Thank you.
Thank you.